tonight, Israel celebrates the dramatic rescue of 4 hostages, while Netanyahu faces a major political blow, the latest on U.S. efforts to secure a ceasefire in Gaza. Plus,
the decision that they hand down is going to have a significant effect on executive power.
The Supreme Court weighs presidential immunity. Could their decision save Trump from prosecution? And
God calls us to be stewards of the earth, and that's something that conservatives should care about.
The young conservatives on a mission to fight climate change and heal the planet. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The fate of Israeli hostages and Gazan civilians is in limbo tonight as the U.S. pushes for a ceasefire. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation from our CBN studio in Washington. I'm Tara Mergener. Well, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is back in the Middle East at what he calls a critical moment in the region. He's meeting with key leaders, including Egypt's president and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. A proposed ceasefire deal hangs in the balance after the dramatic rescue of 4 Israeli hostages over the weekend and amid upheaval in Netanyahu's own government. National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke has the details. Caitlin.
Tara, this is Blinken's 8th diplomatic trip to the region since Hamas's October 7th attack. Meeting with reporters ahead of his sit-down with Netanyahu, he gave an update on ceasefire talks.
My message to governments throughout the region, to people throughout the region is, if you want a ceasefire, press Hamas to say yes.
Blinken says he doesn't know what Hamas's response to the proposal will be, but there's a sense of urgency now among all involved. A dramatic hostage rescue over the weekend could impact the situation. IDF special forces freeing 4 hostages kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th. Hamas claims more than 270 civilians died in that raid, but Israel says the number is less than 100 and point out the terrorists held the hostages in a neighborhood. Still, a major resignation from within the Israeli government just one day after that rescue. Benny Gantz, a member of Israel's war cabinet, criticizing Netanyahu, calling for the government to accept the Biden peace plan and for new elections.
In order to ensure a real victory, it is fitting that in the fall of the year of the disaster, we go to elections, which will result in the establishment of a government that will win faith and overcome the challenges.
According to experts, despite Gantz's departure, Netanyahu's 64-seat coalition is still secure for now. Tara?
Caitlin, thank you. David Daoud is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He's with us now for more. David, welcome. We've been here before, another ceasefire proposal, but the gaps between Israel and Hamas are still wide. Do you believe a ceasefire is possible, and how will this weekend's hostage rescue affect those negotiations?
Thank you for having me on. Well, as we speak, the UN Security Council approved the ceasefire proposal with a vote of 14-1. Now, this ceasefire proposal is it'll operate in three stages. The first stage is going to include or focus on a prisoner swap prisoners for hostages swap. If that succeeds, then this could potentially move into the second stage, which would entail, per the draft or for the draft of the resolution that was approved, a full withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip. Now, Hamas has already welcomed this development. What they want is to survive. What they want is the removal of Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip so they can maintain their hold, their survival within the Gaza Strip. But it's not guaranteed that we're going to get to the second phase. They're expressing their approval of what has happened so far.
Yeah, and it's clear, obviously, there are major divisions in Netanyahu's government. Benny Gantz resigning from Israel's war cabinet. So what does this mean for how Israel carries out the rest of this war?
It remains to be seen. Prime Minister Netanyahu's government will not fall as a result of Gantz's withdrawal. At the same time, having that centrist war cabinet member, someone who on the international stage possesses more popularity than Prime Minister Netanyahu, whose image has been battered not just at home but abroad. That gave Israel a lot of cover to continue prosecution of this war, even in some of its more unpopular moments. His withdrawal may complicate things, especially, again, as this tension with Prime Minister Netanyahu, these anti-Netanyahu sentiments that exist, particularly in Western capitals, continue to come to the forefront.
Right, and we just have a few seconds left, but since the beginning of the war, we've seen daily skirmishes between Israel and Hezbollah and Lebanon. At this point, do you think a full-scale war is inevitable?
It is inevitable, even if it doesn't happen now. Hezbollah is not going to relent from its objective to destroy the state of Israel, and this isn't going to happen in one fell swoop. This is a multi-generational project as far as they're concerned. And none of the ceasefire proposals that we have, be it the French or the American proposal, would actually solve that problem or deter Hezbollah or would put in place some kind of mechanism that could prevent Hezbollah from deciding to attack Israel one day at a time of its choosing. So the war is inevitable. The question is, will Israel accept a ceasefire deal now that does not satisfy its long-term security concerns or not?
Certainly, David, an awful lot of moving parts, and we thank you for your analysis.
My pleasure.
French President Emmanuel Macron dissolved his parliament and called snap elections and a gamble to stay in power. This after his liberal Renaissance Party took a beating from the right-wing National Rally Party.
Serious and weighty decision, but above all, it's an act of trust, confidence in you, my dear compatriots, in the ability of the French people to make the just choice for themselves and for future generations.
Conservative parties in Germany, Italy, Belgium, and the Netherlands also made substantial gains. While the centrist Christian Democrats are still the largest group in the EU, Parliament, Green and Liberal parties suffered defeats. That's going to make it harder for the body to continue supporting climate and open border policies. Well, here at home, the nation's largest Protestant denomination is gathering for its annual convention in Indianapolis this week. The Southern Baptists are expected to vote on key issues, including sexual abuse reform and whether to ban churches with women pastors. One very timely move is an anticipated vote on the question of officially opposing in vitro fertilization. The meeting comes as membership continues to decline, with the SBC losing over 1,200 churches in 2022 alone. This week, the Supreme Court could release an unprecedented decision on presidential immunity. Former President Trump says he shouldn't be held liable for actions taken while in office. As CBN senior correspondent Gary Lane reports, the ruling could have a significant impact on the chief executive's power.
The nation stands at a crucial moment regarding presidential immunity, especially since this case involves former President Donald Trump, who claims he acted in his official duties as president on January 6th and is immune from prosecution.
Regardless of what the court does here, the decision that they hand down is going to have a significant effect on executive power moving forward.
That's because of the possible impact on past presidents. For example, a ruling that presidents do not have unlimited immunity could mean the potential for former President Barack Obama to be held liable for ordering the assassination of Osama bin Laden. The same could go for George W. Bush for his role in the Iraq War and execution of Saddam Hussein, and Bill Clinton for the bombing of a Sudanese pharmaceutical plant. Recently, I spoke with Cedarville University political scientist Dr. Caleb Smith about the case.
It may come down then to official acts as president and unofficial acts as a private citizen or presidential candidate. So how do we decide? Who decides what is official and what isn't?
So the clearest place to go to decide what's an official act and what's not would be the Constitution itself. Now, it's not going to be an exhaustive list, but when we're seeing the president execute powers that are listed there in Article 2, so for example, something like the commander-in-chief power or the power of appointment, those are presidential powers that are recognized and that are authorized by the Constitution. And it's difficult for me to imagine that the president can be criminally charged simply for exercising those kinds of powers.
Bradley Jacob, Associate Dean at Regent University Law School, says courts have already established a legal precedent on civil immunity for presidents.
You can't get damages from a president because of his decisions. And I'm not sure that any of those other issues violated the criminal law, because if you're in a military situation, the president has quite a bit of flexibility as commander-in-chief. And throughout the whole history of the world, presidents, kings, executive leaders have ordered military actions that have caused their own people to die.
Smith argues that the U.S. Supreme Court is likely to rule that presidents are subject to the same criminal standards as military officers.
You have certain proper functions. You have the rules that are in place under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Once you step outside of those, well, then you can be held responsible. I think the president's going to end up in a similar place.
Most constitutional law scholars agree the court is likely to rule that presidents have immunity from prosecution only for their official acts as president. So does that mean Donald Trump's criminal trials could be dismissed?
I don't know that any of them will go away. Maybe a few of the allegations, a few of the indictments will be thrown out, but by and large, I think you're going to see continued movement towards the trials of President Trump, but probably not fast enough to reach any conclusions before the election.
Regardless, this historic and unprecedented Supreme Court decision is expected to result in constitutional consequences, not only for Donald Trump, but for the future of the American presidency. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Countdown to Election Day, the latest on the race to the White House when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. It is still a close race for the White House, but President Biden has a little bit of a reason to celebrate today. A New York Times Siena College poll found that Donald Trump lost some support in the wake of his felony conviction. 47% of voters say they will vote for Trump, and 46% support Biden. That is down from Trump's 3-point lead in April and May. However, analysts say it is still too early to see the full effect of Trump's conviction on the election. Over the weekend, the former president hit the campaign trail in Nevada and slammed Biden's executive order that sealed the southern border.
Millions of people will continue pouring in, and they're coming right through the border like they have never come through before. What he signed means nothing.
Polls show immigration is a top issue for voters this November, no doubt about it. With us now is Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections and also a Faith Nation contributor. Nathan, do you think this slight change in polling numbers is significant in this race? It's really just a hair and memories can be very short. So could the impact of Trump's felony vanish altogether by Election Day?
I think it's still too early to tell whether the conviction is going to matter or not. I think that you nailed it in that, I don't think fundamentally this race has changed all that much. We had a close and competitive race before the conviction. It is a close and competitive race after the conviction. I think we could maybe say that Trump's support has not cratered, but it's still we're 10 days away from the conviction. I think people are still probably processing, or some people haven't even decided what they're going to do or how this is going to matter until much later this year. So I think that I don't expect it to be a game-changing moment, even though it was a historical moment in the campaign.
Yeah, still a ways to go. Meantime, Nathan, and there's an Ohio sheriff. He's calling for the renewal of the death penalty because he's fed up with crime stemming from the border. He says the state is ravaged by nefarious activity because the border is wide open. By the numbers, what is your take? Are voters becoming more concerned about this as we head into November? And could this one issue make or break a second term for Joe Biden?
Well, it is a top issue. I think the economy is still a top issue, but the border security, immigration is something Republicans are going to talk about from now until November. It is going to, even if President Biden's executive order makes a difference in the number of people that are coming across, it's still going to be a vulnerability for Biden because there's always going to be a story about someone who's in this country illegally doing something illegal, and that will continue to make news. And Democrats, I don't know that they're taking it as seriously as what they should. I think they're relying on the fact that Republicans They pushed away a bipartisan bill because former President Trump told them to back away from it. And I don't know that Democrats are going to get as much political momentum out of that, because right now President Biden is in charge. Our voters are holding him responsible for the southern border, and it's something that Democrats are going to have to deal with.
All right, Nathan, we've got less than a minute left. So Biden and Trump, they're currently tied in Virginia, and they're close in a number of other swing states. Is there any one thing either one of them can do to pull ahead at this point and seal the deal in those states?
I don't know anyone's going to seal the deal 5 months from the election, but right now it's about disqualifying the other candidate. We're not going to have an election where we're going to elect someone who is wildly popular with the vast majority of Americans. It's about getting voters to focus on your opponent and making sure that opponent is simply unacceptable and someone who can't have a second term. And that's what this race. It sounds very jaded and pessimistic there, but it's going to be a race to the bottom to November.
And as always, well summarized, Nathan. Thanks for joining us.
No problem. We'll see you next time.
Up next, young Republicans see climate change as a serious issue, how they're bringing the fight to Capitol Hill when Faith Nation returns. Extreme heat and deadly storms are driving some of the debate over climate change and the environment. A team of young conservatives is building a blueprint for the future through grassroots campaigns and legislation on Capitol Hill. CBN's Brody Carter reports from Florida.
Our goal is just getting young people involved, getting young people outside and showing them how beautiful it is.
Clean air and water are important to Danny Lindsay, a self-proclaimed conservative and Florida's state director with the American Conservation Coalition. The group encourages conservatives to join the climate conversation while also leading cleanup initiatives and restoration efforts in their own neighborhoods.
Being the Christian Broadcast Network, I'm sure you guys know, God calls us to be stewards of the earth. And that's something that conservatives should care about. A lot of conservatives are Christians, and we want to show them God's beautiful creation.
A recent poll finds that 81% of young Republicans under 35 see climate change as a serious issue and want to take action. The bigger gap in conservation attitudes exists between political parties, with data showing Democrats as 3 times more likely than Republicans to participate in those activities. Benji Backer is working to change that.
In this era of political tribalism that I think we're all fairly sick of, even if we're just sick of one side of it, there's a reality that the left has controlled the narrative on this for a very long time.
After headlines of 2023 being the warmest year on record, to the high sea levels and ocean temperatures, Backer and his coalition want common sense solutions to protect the planet.
Climate change.
Climate change. Climate change. Climate change. Climate change.
The radical versus radical approach we've witnessed our entire lives hasn't gotten us anywhere, and it's actually set us back. This shouldn't be about politics. This should be about our planet.
Since 2017, 40,000 members have joined some 150 chapters of the American Conservation Coalition nationwide.
Instead of being angry on social media or blocking traffic or throwing tomato soup at priceless paintings, what if you clean up your backyard? What if you take people in your community on a hike? What if you get your church to do a cleanup?
In addition to hands-on efforts, Coalition President Chris Barnard says the organization has helped pass major legislation and is also pushing the country to make smarter decisions when it comes to energy.
Instead of doing fossil fuels in China, instead of getting our uranium fuel from Russia, we need to be producing here in the United States because we can do it cleaner than anyone else, and we do it cleaner than anyone else, but we also have a moral obligation to our own national security to take some of that back.
In Backer's new book, The Conservative Environmentalist, he questions the Biden administration's Green New Deal, pointing out the highly debated $93 trillion legislation would only reduce carbon emissions by 4%, according to its own statistics. He also offers that partnerships between energy companies and environmental nonprofits could be a way for America to engage in diverse energy production without financially burdening future generations.
The environment is so much bigger than just environmental politics. It's about our national security. It's about our economy. It's about our neighborhoods. It's about our quality of life.
While his group operates in all 50 states, Backer sees Florida as a prime location for conservationists to make a significant impact.
Some of the most groundbreaking research that drives policy and conservation change comes from right here in sunny Florida at the Hub SeaWorld Research Institute.
That shows you how busy we are, that the sample's just like...
Scientists here lead dolphin research and rescue programs, along with habitat restoration in the Indian River Lagoon, which spans 40% of Florida's east coast.
We need to go from the bottom up. We need to protect the habitat for the fish so that the fish can be healthy and so that the dolphins have enough prey. We see decreased body condition in dolphins in the Indian River Lagoon across the board. Over 90% are underweight.
Hub SeaWorld Research provides crucial data to lawmakers wanting to shape policies for protecting natural spaces. By partnering with the ACC, they hope to bolster even more support from future conservationists. While dolphins might not be the issue in your backyard, environmental leaders emphasize getting involved in your own community sends a message that makes a difference.
It's all connected. We can't solve the dolphins' problems without thinking about how this affects the entire ecosystem. So that's why it's kind of a daunting problem.
That is how you're going to really make impact and change. If you take care of your local environment and helping nonprofits, whether it's Hub SeaWorld Research Institute or whether it is in your local municipality, that's really where the difference comes in. And that's how you can solve these bigger problems, is by helping local.
Conservationists say this work isn't rocket science. It's harder than that. It isn't just ecological, it's political, it's economical, and biblical to steward the earth and everything in it. But they say it's a puzzle that we can solve if we do it together. Reporting in Melbourne, Florida, Brody Carter, CBN News.
Coming up, man's best friend to the rescue. Next on Faith Nation. And finally tonight, an Oregon man is thankful to be alive, all thanks to man's best friend. Brandon Garrett was driving to meet his family at a campsite last week when he and his 4 dogs slid down an embankment into a creek. One of the dogs escaped, traveling 4 miles to the campsite and alerting Brandon's family that something was wrong when they tracked him down and called 911. Thankfully, rescuers lifted Brandon and his other dogs to safety. Just one more reason to get a dog, right? That's going to do it for Faith Nation. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great night.